Thank you so much, Rabbi Gluck. We've already taken up more of your time than we told you we would. I'll try and keep my comments brief as we wrap up the evening. As I suspect is clear from the press coverage that led up to this event, our decision to come forward and publicly discuss our story and Ilana's journey was a very difficult one. I'd like to publicly thank our children for so clearly leading us down that path. It was really their matter-of-fact, open approach to what we've endured as a family that's given us the strength to move forward in the way that we have. And it all started when people would ask us, "Oh, what's Ilana up to? How's she doing?" And by the way, if you learn nothing else from tonight, think long and hard before you ask that question when you don't know the answer. And I would say, I had these pat answers, and some of you have heard them. Oh yeah, she's trying to figure out what she's doing with her life. She's down in Florida, you know. And at one point, we asked my son Gavi, who's here, and said, "Well, what do you say when people ask what's doing with your sister?" And he goes, "Oh, I tell them she's in rehab." I kind of looked at him and said, "Well, she's not in rehab anymore. She's in sober living." He goes, "Oh, I'll have to change it. I'll tell them she was in rehab." And Leanne and I looked at each other and we said, "Yeah, he's got it right. This is not something that we should run from." And so, over time, the idea for this night came about, and we checked with all of our children. And you know, Ilana's sole condition was that when her story was told, her name be published, so that if people are struggling, they'd have someone to reach out to. All of our other children said, if we can help one person, this is a no-brainer. This isn't about us. This is about doing the right thing. So thank you. So as I thought about what I'd say tonight to close things out, I realized that my fear for all this time was that the first time I'd be discussing Ilana's addiction publicly would be at her funeral. To be able to discuss this when she's in recovery, with her approval and encouragement, for the purpose of helping our community establish a dialogue about this critical issue is truly a blessing. I'd like to just focus these closing remarks on three broad topics. Addiction is a family disease, and you've heard a lot about that already. I'll try not to be repetitive. How important and impactful community support can be to the addict and to their family. And finally, the dialogue with our children. We have 5 children. Ilana's our second oldest child. She's 15 months younger than Yakir, 3 years older than Gavi. Growing up, Yakir and Ilana were truly the best of friends. And addiction, as we've learned, is an isolating disease. Very often, as was the case with Ilana, the sufferer withdraws from her family and friends. And during the course of her teenage years, Ilana's relationship with her siblings really eroded. It was rarely antagonistic, beyond normal sibling antagonism, but the perception was that Ilana just wasn't interested in a relationship. As parents, one of the many challenges we faced was helping our children deal with this. Their reactions were really different and interesting. One was angry. That sibling sister had abandoned her. Another one, ambivalence. Well, I don't really care. She's off doing her own thing. And yet another sibling just wanted to know how to be there for her. Is it appropriate to call her, text her? She's not answering. Should I stop? And so Leanne and I spent a lot of time with our children explaining how part of Ilana's disease really was her isolation. We explained that when someone is unhappy or confused about who they are, it's very difficult for them to be there for others. We offered therapy as an option to our children. Some took us up on it, some didn't. Leanne and I often joke we're the full employment plan for Bergen County therapists. And if anyone needs any referrals or recommendations, we're happy to provide. We had to deal with our own feelings towards Ilana's illness. Guilt, not a productive feeling as we've learned, but boy, does guilt creep in there. Did we parent her inadequately? What could we have done differently? What mistakes should we avoid with our other children? Just remembering those days makes me shudder. We're told by our network of professionals that issues like this can splinter a family or a marriage. I can totally see that. There were times during this ordeal that Leanne and I just couldn't get on the same page. There were times we simply didn't have enough time or emotional bandwidth for our other children. For the most part, though, we intuitively knew that we needed to be in sync. We committed to grow closer as a family as a result of what we were going through, not further apart. And hopefully through it all, our children have learned what it means to never give up on someone, no matter what. We also had to educate ourselves. We didn't have the benefit of an evening like this. Aren't alcoholics and drug users weak people, criminals, bad people? Can't she just say no? Thanks a lot, Nancy Reagan, for that one. We had to learn to separate the person from the disease. Never mind, we had to learn that addiction is a disease. We had to learn that the addict has to make a decision every day, each and every day, not to use that day. We had to learn how to separate unconditional love and support from that nasty word enabling. We had to learn how deceitful the addiction can be, how manipulative it can be to get what it wants. We had to warn our other children, even our parents, if Ilana calls and texts asking for money, no matter how convincing she might be, no matter how plausible her excuse might be, and trust me, the addiction can be quite persuasive. Tell her you love her, but you simply can't support her while she's engaged in destructive behavior. Those were some of the most heartbreaking conversations we ever had as parents or children. We never had the benefit of garnering support from other families that are going through or who went through similar challenges because we didn't know who they are. We had a small group of close friends who were to some extent or another in the loop. They were great. They were lifesavers. You all know who you are, and we owe a lot to you. But they were all limited because they hadn't lived it, thank God. So what can community support accomplish? A very good friend put it best to us. We were trying to absorb the ramifications of the publication of the articles and the Standard and the Link and now the Record. And this friend turned to us and said, now no one will ever suffer alone again. They know that you're out there. They know there's someone else, and they'll never feel alone. Brilliant in its simplicity. I'm fairly sure, I know for a fact, that amongst you are people who have a loved one suffering from addiction, or a neighbor, or a friend, or someone else's loved one, and you might not even realize it. I know that we had no idea there were other sufferers out there, and yet over 15 people we knew before the articles were published have approached us privately over the last 10 days saying, us too, in our community. Perhaps your spouse had a root canal a few months ago and keeps on refilling the pain medication and you're worried. Perhaps your brother lost his job and seems to be acting strangely. Sure, he says he just smokes weed once in a while to calm down, but you worry. Might it be more? Perhaps, like us, your child started drinking at 14, progressed to marijuana in high school, and then moved on to cocaine, heroin, and other harder and potentially fatal drugs when she got to college. Tonight is all about making sure you're not suffering alone. 26 schools, 5 high schools, the full support of our local middle schools, a standing room-only crowd, and many more watching us online. We are all one community supporting you and suffering with you. We don't all understand what you're feeling. We don't all understand the depth of your hurt. But we are devoting our time and attention to learn more, to be able to have some understanding as to how this disease is impacting you. We're not judging you, because we know addiction is a disease. If you need support from us, we're here to provide it. Encouragement, a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, whatever you need. On a very practical level, though, community support can accomplish so much more. We need information sharing. We need to know that we can refer people to great people like Ezi, Rabbi Gluck, great organizations like Amudim to get treatment information and recommendations. We need to create infrastructure for our children and adults to get the formal support that they need. We need to support our schools in rolling out robust prevention and education programs. We need to make this an open discussion so that the person who notices something a bit off about a friend or a spouse knows what to ask and what to do. We need to be Am Echad B'Lev Echad, one nation, one community with one heart, and we can do this because we have done it. Look at the incredible work organizations like Chai Lifeline do with cancer sufferers. Look at what Yachad and Friendship Circle do with special needs youth. We've exhibited a willingness and ability to band together as a community for all sorts of diseases and conditions. We need to do the same for addiction. What can we do to advance the dialogue with our children? Well, tonight's not just about children. As you've heard, addiction does not discriminate based on age, socioeconomics, familial situations, or religion. But many addicts, like Ilana, will report that they started drinking or using in high school or even middle school. That's why it is so incredibly gratifying to see some teenagers in the audience tonight. You teens are heroes. You're taking on the challenge of your generation. We need to talk to our kids about substance abuse. I mean, really talk. Not that, hey, you shouldn't do drugs discussion that many of us have awkwardly had with our kids. I mean a real discussion about how prevalent alcoholism and drug use is, how addiction destroys lives and has become a leading cause of death amongst teens and young adults in this country. How you as parents will always be there to support your children. How your children will, not might, will be exposed to alcohol and drug abuse in high school or prior to that. What should they do? What if they give in to that peer pressure and experiment? What if their best friend is using? Do they tell someone? These are all issues that we need to address head-on and openly with our children. We need our schools to up their game. Leanne and I have been incredibly gratified and impressed with the response that we've received to this evening's events by the sponsoring high schools. Every school clearly understands how important the issue is, and we were impressed with the vigor with which the schools publicized and promoted the event. We wrote to the 7 local elementary middle school heads of school to encourage them to attend and send their leadership. Their response was equally impressive. But we need to do more. And we, the community, need to support and encourage the schools to do more. We need to help the schools obtain the resources to expand their awareness and education plans. We need to stop looking at schools that address drug use publicly as schools that must have a problem. It's everywhere. Every school has a problem. And let me rephrase, it's not right. Society has a problem, and no school is immune. We need to do parent and student education sessions regularly. We need to develop a set of policies around alcohol and drug use that are well known and publicized and demonstrate our sensitivity and understanding of addiction as a disease. Leanne's favorite mantra these days is go big or go home. We're going big and we're not going away. We invite you to join us. We're going to save lives. Before I close, we've set up a dedicated phone number for the Bergen County community. And those of you who have pens want to take it down, it's here. It also will be available when you reach out to Amudim directly. It's 201-464-8000. Nice, easy. It'll be effective as of tomorrow for anyone, sufferer or loved ones who need any support. 201-464-8000. And finally, Ilana, I think you're watching online. Thank you. On behalf of the entire Bergen County community, on behalf of the schools and schools that are co-sponsoring this event, on behalf of Amudim, on behalf of all the sufferers and families who will be helped by your bravery, thank you. Your willingness to share your struggles and your journey publicly has had and will continue to have a monumental impact on this community. We love you.